welcome to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Lowres, and the Good Girl Confessional podcast is brought to us by WB40, Women Beyond 40, a platform for women to find adventures, join a community, and of course help other women to rise. You can check us out at wb40.com. Before we begin, I would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which we are privileged to record this podcast. That for me is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay respects to their leaders, past, present, and emerging. Today in the Confessional, I am very excited to bring you a very special guest. If you love an adventure, or you've thought about having one of your own, or you're thinking it's too late, well, think again. Our special guest today in the Confessional is Regina Petra Meyer, who takes adventuring to a whole new level. She has written an incredible memoir, which of course is called Change of Course, Sailing into Love and Adversity in the Caribbean Shores. She actually jumped on a yacht and was part of a crew, and she sailed from the Caribbean back to Australia. This is a true story. It's extraordinary. Along the way, she finds love, heartbreak, and a number of twists and turns happen. But if you've ever been thinking, wow, my life is a little bit boring and I need to get out and do something, this is the podcast for you. Please welcome to the Confessional, the extraordinarily brilliant Regina. Hello and welcome to the Good Girl Confessional. Regina, how are you?
I'm very good. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Sandy.
I'm excited to have you here and really excited to be chatting about your book, which of course is Change of Course. Wow, what a fascinating life you've had, Regina, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I have certainly stepped out of the conventional role a little bit.
I love that, a little bit, to say the least. So tell us, before we start talking about your amazing book, which is a memoir, tell us about your life. And when you say unconventional, tell us, how do you live your life and what's your purpose? I love this.
Well, I grew up in Switzerland. I don't know, some of you might have traveled there. So I come from Interlaken, which is set among the most beautiful mountains, the Alps. The scenery is just amazing, but it is very confined there. And what I found growing up, that it wasn't just the mountains that had a tendency to be a little bit confined. It also tended to extend to the minds of the people there. So it was very traditional. And I sort of remember thinking, even in my teens, that I just wanted to step out. I wanted to try different things and see different parts of the world, experience different cultures. And so, I started traveling when I was very young. I went to Switzerland really just to earn money so I could leave again. And I guess in a way, this has sort of become my purpose, to experience what there is to experience. And this took me eventually on the high seas and into the Caribbean.
Incredible, amazing. You've clearly got like an adventurous spirit, and maybe you were born with that. I'm not sure. Did you start to think about travel from a very, very young age?
Well, it's actually funny you ask that, because, I was wondering that myself, because neither of my parents are travelers. And I asked my mom one time when we were on a phone call, and she just started laughing. She said, no, when you were 3 years old, I caught you walking down the road with a little suitcase in hand. And I sort of thought at that point, okay, well, it's obviously just something that's innate in me, that drive to want to see and explore.
Oh, I love that. I love it. I just had this little visual of you with your little suitcase. I think that's so amazing. And did your parents read you a lot of books? Were you an avid reader when you were young? Did it actually, do you think, for me, I guess reading books, helped me to figure out that there's a whole world out there, not just my little life when I was a kid.
Oh, yes, for sure. Look, I was a library member as a child, and I actually started speed reading. So and I'm terrible at maths, but for some reason I was able to figure out, the amount of pages I had left and the time until the library closed. And I would speed read, run down to the library and grab the next books. And there was one author in particular, she, I don't think she's translated into English, unfortunately, but she was a teenage author and she was quite a prolific writer, and she'd written all about girls that went out into the world and interacted, with the Native Americans and, traveled to Africa. And I just remembered thinking, A, I want to travel like that, and B, I want to write a book.
What is this author's name?
Federica de Cesco.
Okay, in case anyone who wants to look her up. I love that, because the power of books for me, I grew up as a kid here in Australia, and I had what I considered to be quite a small life in some ways, but books were my escape. And so I love that. I think the power of books and the power of words is so important. And that's why the power of women's stories is so important, right? Because in her writing those books, she ignited a fire, obviously, in you, although maybe it was already there with your suitcase at 3. I love that. Maybe what she did was just encourage what was already there.
Yeah.
Right? But I think it's so important. And so you 100% lived your dreams and went off on many adventures around the world. And congratulations on this beautiful book. I'm going to hold it up here for those that are watching. This is Change of Course, Sailing into Love and Adversity on Caribbean Shores. Oh, wow. What an adventure this is. So, Regina, please tell us what inspired the book and tell us about this extraordinary time of your life.
Well, it all started when I was living in South Australia and I was feeling really stuck, and I think that's often a sort of the catalyst for us to actually really do something. It's the pain of, what I'm doing at the moment is just not really working. So I was in a relationship that was good, but it had just sort of reached a stale, format. And we were really good friends, but there wasn't really much else left there. So we decided that I should fulfill a lifelong dream. Now, my ex got really, really seasick, and I've always dreamt of sailing a big ocean. Again, I really don't know why, because I'm from a landlocked country. Neither of my parents were really big sailors. Anyway, so I crewed on a yacht, and I was a bit cheeky at the time because I'm still cheeky, by the way. I just needed to clear that up, right?
I love that. And I love that. And my listeners will be laughing their asses off right now because
you need it, right?
100%. And we love a cheeky person here in the confessional. So.
So, we agreed that I could fulfill my lifelong dream, and I could have gone and sailed, on a boat in Australia or, in the Pacific, which would have been a lot closer. But of course, I picked the boat that was the furthest away with the longest possible trip that I could fit into the time frame that we agreed. So I flew to the Caribbean on a one-way ticket, and the plan was to sail the boat back to Australia, which would have taken us through the Panama Canal and all across the Pacific. That's a major trip. Of course, in my life, plans never quite pan out the way I set them out. And I land in the Caribbean, and after a few weeks working on the boat, the trip falls apart. And I'm stranded now in the Caribbean. And also I'd met this wonderful, exotic man, the antidote to my partner at home. And of course, butterflies in the stomach, and, also feeling very guilty and ashamed of actually falling in love whilst I had a really honest and loyal partner at home. Eventually, the relationship in Australia ended, and that was my call. I actually put it all on the line, and I thought, you know what, this is just the result of where we were heading anyway. And I started a completely new life, in the Caribbean. Eventually I ended up living there, pursuing the romance, and yeah.
This is like mind blowing for so many people. So the plan was not originally, though, to stay in the Caribbean, was it? The plan was that you were actually going to be on this yacht and sail back to Australia. So tell us about when you first get to the Caribbean. I mean, I want to know what it felt like when you first saw the yacht and you thought, yeah, I'm really going to do this.
Look, it was so funny because, right, when you crew on a yacht, at the time, also I have to say, it was before smartphones, so I did have a chat with the skipper on Skype. And so I'd seen his face. He was a really old man, and the plan was to sail the boat back, eventually for them to sell the boat, because they were just at that stage in their life. I stepped onto the boat, and they were, they were a lovely couple, but they were also quite righteous in their opinions. And I remember stepping aboard and going like, oh, like, I hadn't thought of this. I'm actually stepping into someone's home, and I'm going to have to live and breathe with them for the next, it would have been 3 months. And that was sort of when I realized that I had bargained a lot more than I initially knew. I'm sort of the person, I'm really spontaneous. So I will jump at a chance, I'll take it. And then once I'm there, I'll go like, oh, hang on a second, what did I do?
But that really speaks to your incredible adventurous spirit, that you just go, to hell with it. I'm stuck in Australia. I'm not happy. I'm in this relationship that's a little bit stale right now, and I'm just going to bloody go to the other side of the world and sail a yacht back to Australia that'll take 3 months with people you don't know. Like, to me, that is just brilliant. I love that about you.
It was really fun. Like, I just remember actually when the plane was approaching Antigua, I had this feeling, it was, I guess it was intuition, and it just was like, this country is going to be good for me. And I felt like a sponge, like the whole time things happened, and it was exciting. And sometimes, it was also really scary. Like, I was on my own, and when the trip fell apart, I really didn't know what to do. I didn't have a lot of savings, I didn't want to fall back onto my partner or my parents. Like, there was the expectation from me that if I truly step out and, I'm on my own, I'm going to have to make it on my own.
Wow. And so that's gutsy for a woman, especially, and you're young woman and you're on the other side of it and you're in the Caribbean. Let's talk about that. So the plan was to sail the yacht back, but this all falls apart.
That's right.
Suddenly it's ditched. But before that, let's talk about partying in the Caribbean. Let's talk about that.
Right.
And what it led to, because, I love this cheeky. Let's talk about that.
Let's get into the saucy bit, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I was with my partner in Australia for 12 years at the time, right? And I guess we all know when you're in a relationship for a long time, things can get a little bit boring, and that doesn't apply to everyone, of course, but it applied to me. And so when I was in the Caribbean and the captain said, oh, we're going out to a sunset party on a beautiful cliff top, who wants to come? Of course I was in. What kind of question is that?
That sounds terrible. Oh, no.
Yeah, right? So we went up there, and, you know, it was really this beautiful colonial setup. And there was these cliffs overlooking the most beautiful bays with the yachts all anchored there. And we were getting some rum punches, and there was a steel band playing. And I sort of checked out the area, and I remember, you know, my eyes fell onto this really handsome, exotic local man. You know, he had like stubbly little dreadlocks, and he had the most sensual moves. You know, I was just captivated. And he looked at me and he smiled, and, you know, the smiles is so bright and beautiful. And I felt really like I was like shocked. Why would he even look at me? And of course he walks over a while later and asks me to dance. And the thing is, I've always loved dancing, but I never really had much opportunity. We didn't, in my old relationship, we didn't go out that much. And so when I started dancing with him, and it was that, you know, Caribbean style where there's a lot of hip movements and sort of body movements, and it's just so sensual, and it's so how do I say, it's invigorating in the body to feel the music and the rhythm. And I just felt like, in a sense, I was almost reborn. It was incredible. Like there was something in me as a woman that I hadn't felt like this before.
I love that. And so it's like this kind of awakening this inner goddess, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So first of all, he sounds fabulous, and good for you. And wow, I love this. So you're dancing on this beach. It's a beautiful thing going on. So you return to the party other nights. Is that right?
Yes, I returned week after week. You know, the first week we sort of danced together, and then I'm sure everyone can relate, you know, when you first cast your eyes on someone and you feel, you know, the electricity in the air and the butterflies in your stomach. You know, you walk away from that, and I couldn't think about anything else. Like the whole week, you know, I was learning about sailing and, you know, hoisting sails and folding sails and cleaning the boat and all that sort of stuff. And he was on my mind. So week after week, I was pining for Sunday afternoon. And of course, he was always there. We'd resume where we'd left off before. And as, you know, the weeks sort of progressed, I was contemplating, you know, how far do I take it? Is it okay to have an affair, even though I have a relationship at home? You know, there was great conflict, but immense attraction.
So eventually, as you say, you call it you end your relationship back home, which frees you in some ways, I guess, to explore new possibilities and new horizons.
Yeah, that's right. So, what happened when the trip fell apart, I still had to actually leave Antigua, you know, to satisfy visa regulations. And also, I guess a part of that still was, I still wanted to have my sailing adventure, you know, like, it wasn't in my cards to, you know, just have a romance in the Caribbean. I wanted the full package. So I jumped on a yacht instead, sailing across the Atlantic, which was amazing. It was really rough weather, actually. It was very exciting. And when I came to Europe, I met up with my ex, or, you know, he was still then my partner. We met up in Switzerland, and we actually ended the relationship. And to my ex-partner, Sven is his name, his actual name. He wanted to keep his name in the book, by the way. We ended the relationship on really amicable terms, and I decided to return back to Antigua and pursue the romance there. But also, you know, a really interesting moment was when I was on the way to Antigua, when I actually realized, you know, the thing that I'd always been craving for was freedom, you know, and when I was suddenly free, and it hit me that with that freedom came the responsibility to look after myself. You know, I had no one else to to fall back on. So if I went to the Caribbean, I had to make it, and I was on my own. And that was kind of the bittersweet moment of realizing, that's the price of freedom.
Right? Wow, incredible. So tell us, why did the trip fall apart? Because I guess that's important. The initial trip. So you do end up sailing the seas, and I love that. Oh my God, you are incredible. But the original trip falls apart. So what happened there?
Well, I was on that boat we stayed in Antigua for a good 5 weeks on that first yacht. So other crew arrived. We were preparing the boat for its passage. And let me just paint the picture for anyone that hasn't sailed here before. So what it actually means, it's like you book yourself into an Airbnb, and your hosts are living in the same unit with you, and you close the door for the next 3 weeks whilst you're at sea. And you don't leave, And right. So as we were working on the yacht, of course, opinions came up, tempers flared, and there was a lot of tension. And eventually it just got too much for the other crew, and they decided they weren't going to waste their holiday on an unhappy trip. And they decided to pursue other plans. And with them leaving shortly before we were actually scheduled to embark on our passage, there was no chance that we could replace the crew. So the trip was just cancelled. Mm.
Wow. Okay. But that's okay, because you end up on another boat, which is great, another yacht.
That's it.
Because you're not a person who's just going to sit still for long. And how did that come about? So did you have to then kind of try and talk to people and try and find out, is anyone sailing to Australia? What's happening?
Well, Antigua is a really big yachting hub. So it's for leisure yachts and also a big super yacht hub. So in sailing season, the bays and the marinas are chock-a-block full with boats. Oh. So, there's plenty of opportunity. But the hard thing is, it's never easy to market yourself, right? It's just hard. So it took me a long time to get comfortable to actually just walk up to a crew member and say, hey, I'm looking for a passage, where are you heading? Do you need any crew? And in this instance, I saw actually a notice posted, I think it was a power pole, and it's just the crew wanted for a transatlantic. And I called up the guy and I met up with the skipper. He was an Irish guy the next day, and it was less than 5-minute conversation. He was so relaxed about it, and he goes like, have you sailed before? I said, well, not much, but I really want to do a big passage. And he said, okay. And probably asked if I can cook, and then he goes like, all right, see you Monday.
Oh my God, I love that. Everything about your life is brilliant. Anyway, so terrific. Just turn up. Come on.
That's it.
And what was it like, by the way, to do that big adventure? Because that's what you'd been dreaming of.
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, for me, it was amazing to watch Antigua disappear on the horizon, even though, I left my newly sparked romance there. But just to be on a boat, on, a wind propelled boat, and to see land disappear. And then, the next day and the day after and the day after, there's nothing but ocean for days and days and days on end. And we ended up in pretty rough weather a few days in. And, of course, I've been reading and watching books prior to the trip. And I mainly watched disaster movies, to be honest, and documentaries. I watched, The Perfect Storm, Freak Wave documentaries, reports of people, cast adrift. I just really wanted to know what happens in the worst case scenario. So when we encountered quite adverse conditions, it wasn't looking so bad to me. It's all relative. I was reading about 20-meter waves, and we had maybe 5-6-meter waves. It was okay. So I think, and I loved it. I was surfing the boat, I was steering it, and I was surfing a 50-foot yacht down a wave, and then gradually climbing up the crest to the next wave. And I got smashed from the front and the back. And I just really feel, I remember feeling completely alive. Like, wow. That's probably one of my most vivid memories to date, being out there steering the boat. And just both ocean and me, yeah.
Oh, I love this so much. You are extraordinary. There's so many people in the world not living their life to the full. And so here's you just going, oh, no, to hell with it. And I love that kind of mentality of, well, it could always be worse. So right? So I'll watch disaster movies, and if it's not like that, we're all good. You're amazing. Okay, so you finally get back to Australia, and I guess with that, as you say, comes huge responsibility because you in the relationship with your partner or your then partner. And so what was the driving force? I mean, obviously, yes, you sparked a relationship with this gentleman over in the Caribbean, but what was the drive to go, you know what, I'm going back. I'm actually going to do it.
I think some life decisions we think about greatly. Others are kind of, circumstantial. And that was definitely a circumstantial one. I remember being in Switzerland, and I didn't really know where to go. My parents, of course, they sort of quietly begged me to stay in Switzerland after they knew that the relationship had broken up. I just knew I couldn't stay. I didn't want to stay in Switzerland. So the question was, do I go back to Australia? But everything was, it just didn't appeal. So for me, it really came down to where else would I go if not Australia or Switzerland? And of course, if you have a pending romance, what do? You just go back to that. If in doubt, just chase romance.
I love it. All right. So you go back to the Caribbean, and he's waiting, obviously. This gentleman. Was he waiting?
Yes.
I'm assuming yes.
Yeah, he was waiting. Yes, he was. And he was very keen to have me back. And, the interesting thing was he lived in a really rustic accommodation. It was like a tiny wooden shack, 3 by 5 meters maybe. There was no electricity, no running water, pit toilet in the backyard. I had to do the laundry by hand. Like I got, my knuckles were getting raw from rubbing all the fabric together. I mean, it was completely different to anything that I'd experienced before. Completely different. And so I was navigating, not only being in a new country, in a new relationship, I was also completely cut off from my social network because there wasn't smartphones. A phone call was tremendously expensive. I didn't even have a laptop, so I was relying on internet cafes, and it was quite challenging at times. I felt really lonely.
Wow. And so the relationship sparks up and you decide that you're going to stay, and at some point you actually, I don't know, what did you do for work? Because you rented a place, which is amazing in and of itself because you stayed there. Tell us about that, because that's no easy feat either. I'm thinking about, as you say, being in a country that is completely foreign to everything you've known before.
Well, I guess in a way I am a really proactive person. So if I want something, if I set my mind to it, I go for it. And, I just sent out so many applications to so many places. Eventually, just by sheer luck, I guess I would have gotten lucky. But also, I guess I can't put it any other way, but it really highlighted the privilege that I had as a white person in Antigua. I have education. I have the ability to go to an internet cafe. I had a resume ready and available. And eventually I got a job. I got transportation with the job, so within a matter of 2 weeks from arriving on island, I had a job, I had transportation, and I was only one of the only people in the tiny village where I lived, where I was, by the way, the only white person in residence, that had transport. You know, and that wasn't lost on me, that I could arrive, I could secure a job with a decent income. I was able to even negotiate. You know, he wanted me to work more hours, and I just said, no, that's not happening, you know. And I got the job anyway. And that's different for the local people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that that's really such an important point, right, to make. You do make that point so beautifully in the book as well, by the way, that you are the only white person living in that community, and what comes with that. So great. So you've got a job and you decide, I'm just going to rent this. So I've seen a picture of the little place that you lived in and you rent. So this is very far from Switzerland or Australia, really. And how was that experience of living in that tiny little place?
You know, to be honest, I only have really fond memories of it. It's interesting because you know, life was thrown back and it became really simple. And I am so grateful that I was able to experience that, you know, even doing the laundry and carrying groceries on a bus. But life was, you know, it was pleasant. I was welcomed. You know, that's the one thing that really sort of, it makes me a bit sad almost. You know, I arrived there, no one was owing me anything, but they all welcomed me. And I was often thinking, if I were to consider taking, you know, Jay, my love interest, if I would take him to Switzerland or Australia, it would be a completely different story, you know, and that's just the generosity I experienced in Antigua from the Antiguan people was great. It was just outstanding. And I was helped, you know, and not because I asked or because they were getting something in return, but people offered help quite often.
Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. So, like all good books, I suppose there are twists and turns in this book. And so one of the twists, I guess, is that you're no longer in Antigua and that you were, you know, no longer with that love interest. But so life, and I guess the universe, was hell-bent on making sure that you had more adventures in your life. Tell us what happens beyond then.
Well, you know, in the end, I guess it was an adventure, and it just didn't turn out. How do I say this without giving everything away, right? That's a little bit tricky. But, you know, I guess it just comes down to this. You know, sometimes even though your heart's completely in it, things don't work out. And I had to come to the conclusion eventually that it was time to go. And it was with a really heavy heart that I did so. But I actually ended up sailing more. So I ended up sailing to America. And I sort of entered, you know, professional super yacht crew industry. And I did that for another maybe 6 months or so. And then I had enough, actually. It just got, you know, when you imagine that I set out a year and a half prior thinking that I was going on a 3-month trip. And since then, everything changed. My life, you know, my relationship, I didn't have a home. My parents were also getting a little bit upset with me because my life seemed so unsettled and so far away from what they were used to. I just had the yearning to go back to something that was a little bit more stable. And so I actually returned to Australia. I remember flying to Brisbane. I bought myself a car and I had a little bit of savings because I was working in the super yacht industry. So I just wanted to visit friends, you know, and to just reconnect to that social network that I hadn't had for so long. And whenever I visited friends, they would go like, but Regina, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? And I was like, I'm just happy. I'm just, I'm cruising. And then eventually I was like, I better come up with a response to them, because it seems to really unsettle everyone that I don't know where I'm going. So I looked at the road atlas in Australia, and I opened it, and I looked at Cairns, and I'd lived there briefly in Cape Tribulation with Sven at the time, and I really liked the tropics, but it was a little bit too hot for him. And so I thought, you know what, why don't I go to Cairns now that I am on my own? And it's almost a bit like the Caribbean. It's actually, the same climate. It's also really multicultural. I didn't want to live in a place with an all-white society anymore. And so I basically, I sort of said, all right, that's where I'm going. And I've been here pretty much ever since. Of course, I do go off on adventures here and there. But yes, it's become my home.
Oh, I love that so much. You are like just an extraordinary human being. I love, though, that one of the most powerful things that I get from this book actually is a sense, in terms of the sense of your life, is that you really realize that how much you honor and respect freedom and how important that is to you in your life.
Oh, look, it's huge. To me, it's what makes life worthwhile, really, and freedom is something I think we often think is a little bit out of reach, but it isn't. You can get freedom in little ways, and it's basically just following your heart. Do more of what makes your heart sing, and feel like, for me, it's when I feel that joy. It's never any big events or, those, a new purchase. It's not that. It's really just looking at an amazing sunset or doing a wonderful hike and, just appreciating what's around us in the moment.
Oh, I love that so much. And how did you cope, like during COVID, for example, when travel seemed to be so elusive for so many people?
Yeah. How did we all cope with that, right? Look, I think when I moved to Australia, interestingly enough, I always thought to myself, it's easy now, but what if something changes one day and I can't just go back? So when all of a sudden I couldn't just go back, I was like, oh, okay, here we are. That's what I've considered. And for me, it wasn't actually as hard as I thought. But then again, I was in Cairns and we had very little lockdown. And, the very first lockdown, we could still go out. So I am a big nature person. Give me a hike or a swim or a bike ride and I'm happy. And we could always do that. I don't know how I would have coped in Melbourne or Sydney. That was tough.
I'm here in Melbourne and I can tell you, yes, it was.
Oh, that's, wow. Yeah, I have huge compassion and admiration for people that made it through okay. That's a massive emotional challenge to be so cramped up. Of course, I miss traveling, but I've sort of also, it's interesting, I've almost gotten used to not traveling.
Yeah, wow.
So, but I sort of, in the last 2 months, I've certainly felt the itch and I sort of think, oh, it's coming back. Yes. So I would love to go to Africa. That's probably one of the things that would be high on my list next.
Because I was going to ask that. So where will the universe take you next? For Africa, whereabouts in Africa especially do you feel that pull?
Well, if I had the money or if I see an opportunity, I would actually love to travel through Africa by vehicle, like, the whole continent.
But you'll never think small, Regina. I love that so much.
So please buy the book, so I can fund my next travels.
Exactly right.
I think what is probably more realistic is that eventually I might look at volunteering at a game reserve. just, for a couple of months and just experience life actually in Africa. I would really love that.
Amazing. You are amazing. Everything about you is incredible. Everybody needs to, I'm going to put up all the links to this book and where they can buy it and how they can follow you, because this is quite amazing. The book, of course, is called Change of Course, which I love.
That's it.
I love it. But, it's not just, So for people or women listening to this, and a lot of our listeners are women, over the age of 40, what would be your advice to them if they're thinking, I need an adventure in my life, or I've never had an adventure in my life, but damn, I don't want to, live with regret. What's your advice to them?
Well, my advice is that, knowledge helps to build your courage. So educate yourself on what your dream is, what you want to do, and cover the basics. It doesn't really matter if it's a small business or if it's a travel dream. And know sort of the risks that you're up against. If it's travel, make sure you have enough money in your pocket, and that will sort of boost your courage. Trust in yourself, trust in other people, and I would really throw in there, don't watch the news. Like, honestly, it's just detrimental in that respect. The one thing I found out through my travels, I really built up trust in myself, and that's invaluable to know that you can have your own back. So, look at your achievements. If you're a mother, what an achievement to raise children, or, wherever you're in. Look at actually the skills you have and value them. And then basically trust to go, because what's the worst thing that can happen? Things don't work out. You can always come back. So, for me, it's always, I think we tend to overthink things, and when you start overthinking risks and what could go wrong, we don't do what we like to do. So just try. Like, even with the book, I didn't know, I self-published it, right? And it was a massive journey. And I had a lot of doubt along the way. And I thought, maybe I shouldn't do it. Maybe it's not worth it. Who's going to read it? But you know what? I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it for myself. And that was an adventure in itself. So I think you just have to sort of trust that what you choose is what's right for you at the moment. You don't need to know the outcome. That's a big one.
that's the best advice. Because the only certainty in life is uncertainty. So that's what I love.
Right. Yeah.
We can't control everything and we can't control the outcome, definitely. But traveling is such a beautiful adventure, and I love that you've done so much of it on your own. As a woman, I think it's so fabulous. And I love that you wrote this book, because I think this book will inspire other women.
I hope so. That's really why I wrote it, because I think sometimes women have a tendency to sort of, we tend to not really value ourselves, or, I look at myself and I always think, oh, she knows it much better than I do, or, she's better, more beautiful, all that sort of stuff. I said, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
I love that. And I do 100% think exactly that. You have, walked down a path much like, say, the books that came before you, like Eat, Love, Pray. This is such a beautiful book, because, yes, it's a book about, finding a romance, but really the romance was all about you and you connecting to your adventurous self and following through and doing something that so many of us could only dream about. You got on a yacht and you sailed the high seas. It's incredible.
Thank you. That's really beautiful, actually. Thanks.
I think it's true, and I'm so grateful that I had the chance to chat with you today about this and your beautiful adventure. And I do hope everyone, if you're thinking about going on an adventure, or if you're feeling stuck in your life, go out and buy this book, read the book, and hopefully you'll be inspired as well to find an adventure of your own.
Thank you. Yeah, I would love that. And if you do get inspired, please contact me. Let me know. I'm actually an outgoing, sort of an extrovert author, which is quite unusual. And I love hearing from people. So please contact me.
I love that. And when this podcast goes to air, please put your comments as well and reach out to Regina. I love this.
That's it.
I think you are extraordinary. I've loved our time today. Thank you so much for joining me. I think you're brilliant.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure, really.
You're welcome. And I feel like, on this Saturday morning, because it's a Saturday morning here, that, I'm probably going to go and do boring things like grocery shop. But now you've made me
That's it.
Where do I go next?
That's it. Let's all, dream a little bit.
I love it so much. Thank you so much for joining us in the Confessional, Regina.
Thank you. My pleasure. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is brought to you by WB40, Women Beyond 40 magazine, available now at WB40.com. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to quality podcasts. We're also now available on YouTube. We chat with really interesting women about their hard-won wisdom, but it really helps us if you can subscribe, like, and share the podcast. Thanks so much for your support. Bye for now.